Question number 4. Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. What is the additional amount of gross debt that the Crown has taken on since the government was elected in November 2008?
Honourable
Mr.
Bill
Speaker,
English.
Gross debt in 2008-9 was $43 billion. At the time, Treasury was forecasting it would rise to $125 billion by this year. In fact, forecasts now show that gross debt will reach $80 billion. That is a reduction of $45 billion on the forecasts inherited by the incoming national government. Mr. Speaker, and that doesn't take account of the fact that in 2008-9 those forecasts did not, because they could not have included the impact of the Canterbury earthquakes and the generally slow recovery from the global financial crisis. So in the circumstances, the government has pursued prudent and balanced policies that have led to an increase in gross debt, and if we continue on our current path, that debt will start to reduce in the next year or two.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Despite that answer, can he actually confirm that New Zealand's gross debt has gone up by $51 billion under his watch and now represents 36.1% of GDP, an increase of 18.2 points since he took office?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, the figures will be roughly pointed in the right direction. I can't confirm the actual figures, but it is a bit ironic coming from a party that's advocated more spending the whole way through the last 7 years.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Further to that answer, can he confirm that net debt is currently $66 billion or 28.1% of GDP compared to $12 billion and 6.8% of GDP in 2008, a five-fold increase under his watch?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yeah, it is roughly that, although the percentage of GDP is too high because statistics have rebased the GDP number and it's actually closer to 25%. But of course, the government has followed a balanced policy where, with respect to net debt, we've tried to minimise the amount of borrowing in the face of the recession and the earthquakes on the one hand, and exercise pretty careful constraint on government spending so that we don't run debt out of control. Every recommendation that party has made would have ended up with higher levels of debt.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I apologise. I have a point of order. Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave of the House to table a paper from the Parliamentary Library that shows that the figures I just gave on net debt are in fact accurate.
Order. Leave is sought to table that particular Parliamentary Library document. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled. Supplementary question, Andrew Bailey.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance. What steps has the government taken to reduce Crown debt?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, just by way of example, if I look at the government's new spending and revenue initiatives over the past 6 budgets, net of reprioritised spending, over 6 budgets, that new spending and revenue has totalled less than $2.7 billion over those 6 budgets. By comparison, the equivalent number for the 6 budgets of the previous government was $20 billion. It was $20 billion over 6 budgets. So the government has sought to minimise the increase in debt in the face of difficult circumstances by controlling its spending very carefully, at the same time as improving public services and supporting the most vulnerable. And we believe we've got the balance about right.
Worst economic record in 50 years.
There's nobody else, it's just me.
Order. Supplementary question. Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that New Zealand is now paying $10.4 million in interest each day to service the debt built up under his watch?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, that may be around the figure. And of course it would have been higher if we'd listened to that member when he protested outside public service buildings around Wellington against any spending restraint.
Point of order. Is this a point of order?
Yes, it is, Mr. Speaker. I was going to say that I don't think any of that material was relevant to the answer, but if he thinks a 1% pay increase is outrageous...
Member will resume his seat. Supplementary question, Andrew Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What progress has been made in achieving the government's fiscal goals?
Well,
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated, we've made measured and incremental progress. We could have gone faster. There's no doubt about that. If we had done what other governments have done, fired thousands of civil servants, we could have gone slower if we'd listened to the finance spokesman for the opposition and spent a lot more money and run up a lot more debt. But we think we've got the balance about right. The operating balance has shrunk significantly from a peak of around 18 billion to around an estimated 500 million for this year, and that's very significant progress.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is he satisfied that he is fulfilling his promise to New Zealanders to, quote, reduce total debt to prudent levels by incurring gross and net debt levels of 85 billion and 66 billion respectively?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes. And New Zealanders are pleased. And I think the election showed New Zealanders on average are pleased that they've got a government that understands that to achieve those things you need to exercise restraint in spending, where the opposition finance spokesman has been protesting around Wellington, outside the public service buildings, that the government isn't spending enough.
Order. Order. Question number 5. Right Honourable Winston Peters.
This question is to the Prime